Welcome to the Seoul Patch Podcast, the podcast where three American expats explore different topics related to living and working in South Korea. With a combined 45 years of living experience in Asia, there are plenty of stories to tell. So, pop in your headphones and make yourself comfortable. It's time for the Seoul Patch Podcast.
My tainted perception distorts, my true meaning is blurred. I am lost to the echoes of whisper and speaking a matter inventive.
All right, so we're here today with teacher Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I first met Stephanie through Facebook. I was posting about Korea and some of the places where people lived, whether you're outside in the country or if you lived in the city. And Stephanie, you made a comment about having taught English here, and you were actually kind of out in the boonies a little bit in Jindo. Is that correct? Am I correct about that?
Yes, I was living and teaching in Jindo.
Yeah. Now, if we went back just a little bit farther, how did you end up in Korea? Like, when did you come here the first time?
Oh gosh, I came after I finished my master's.
Mm-hmm.
I came.
I did the exact same thing.
It's kind of an escape, right? But for me, It was because there was so much pressure to do a PhD straight away, and I had enough of academia, having only known academia my entire life at that point. And I had a friend who was in Daegu. While I was finishing my master's, she was doing a year in Daegu, and she was just loving it. And I was so jealous of her experiences, her teaching experiences, her travel experiences. So I thought, let's give this a try.
And did she help you find a job, or did you get a recruiter? Okay.
When was this? How many years ago?
2014.
Okay.
Oh wow. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Just to give you a little context, Kevin and I, we've been teaching together for probably 15 years at the same university, and he's actually at a different.
We've been in Korea for 15 years, but we've only been working together for about 12. 13,
oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
I did my first 2 years. Yeah.
I started in 2006 at my current university, but I came to Korea in 2002. So I'm a little bit of an OG, but not quite. I'm not like a 90s guy, but I'm close. Yeah, I'm not too far away. I'm a World Cup guy. That's my generation. I remember the World Cup in 2002. So now, where are you from? What's your home country?
Canada.
You're from Canada. And what were you studying? What was your
criminology and sociology?
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So you got your master's degree. Did you teach university here, or did you?
I did.
You did. Okay.
Yes.
And how
in Jindo?
No. So after my first 2 years, I relocated to Gwangju. So that's 2 hours north of Jindo, but it's still if you guys are in Seoul. Mm-hmm. Gwangju is still a little city compared to Seoul, but Gwangju is big, like a big night out when from Jindo.
Yeah, I really want to hear about the small town too, and we'll get to that. I just wanted to give our listeners a little context so they can kind of. So you taught at a Hagwon the first 2 years, and then once
the first year was a Hagwon. Then I went to Chodenhakyo.
Oh, okay, middle school.
Yeah, and then when I moved to
Chodong is elementary.
Sorry, elementary school. Right. Okay, sorry about that. I'm my Korean. I got it mixed up with Junghakyo, and I should know. My daughter
was the elementary school. Was that also in Jindo then?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and then I was teaching. I taught at elementary schools in Changsong, which is 30 minutes outside of Gwangju. So I lived in Gwangju, but I was teaching in the countryside of Gwangju. So I was
commuting to outside.
Yeah, so I was taking a bus to a village and literally get dropped off at the end of the road by the bus driver and walk 20 minutes down a essentially dirt road to where the school was.
Wow.
And sometimes people knew who I was, right? So when if teachers were driving by, they'd be like, oh, there she is, let's pick her up. There was no public transport
Oh, so just like the local farmer or whatever, just hop in the truck and I'll take you to the school.
Yeah.
It sounds so kind of charming and folksy though, when you describe it. I mean, I know that,
Yeah.
yeah.
It
I mean, it
was-
must have
it
been
was-
safe, right? Like you felt pretty safe there. Like it's small.
Yeah, relatively safe, I would say. Everyone knew who I was. So
I guess were you probably the only foreigner in that like area then?
so in Jindo, there was Jindo Up, so like the village, and we were all sort of based in the village, and then we would commute out. Everyone would commute out, because if you lived sort of where you were actually teaching, you would be so isolated.
Right.
Oh, sure,
right.
sure.
Yeah.
So there was kind of like a little mini, like small expat group, I guess, there.
There was 8.
Eight, very
You can count them
small.
all. Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Wow.
do you still
How did
do you still stay in touch with those 8? Did you guys become quite close in that first year?
Not all of us, but yeah, definitely. So I had a friend who was she's American, and her now husband is Korean. And he was the very first person I met, and he just called me up on the landline because it was such a small place that he knew the person who had taught previous to me. So he knew the number, called me up and was like, "Hi, I'm so and so." I was like,
Just to
"Hi,
introduce
sister."
himself. Oh,
Yeah. Do you want to come out for lunch?
wow.
Yeah,
Yes,
that was my very first
of
day.
course.
Yeah.
That is.
How did you
so small
find
town.
like this job in such a small city when you were in Canada at the time?
So when I decided this is what I wanted to do, and I was working with a recruiter, I just told the recruiter I want to work on any island.
You specifically wanted, is it that you love island life, or did you just
I
want
love
like,
island life. In Canada, I was
Okay.
living on a small island, so yeah,
gotcha.
there's charm to that. I like the small
Yeah, I'm from a pretty
town
small
community.
town in Arizona, actually. And I don't know, maybe your small island in Canada might be smaller than my small town in Arizona. We have a population of about 50,000 in Flagstaff. So somewhat
That's like
small,
a major
but not-
metropolis, right? Compared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the island that I
My-
was living on is called Peely
Okay.
Island. It's famous for wine.
Which province is it in Canada?
Ontario, but it's in the middle of the Great Lakes, in the middle of Lake Erie, and the border between Canada and America is basically drawn around the island.
Oh,
kind of
okay.
Scoops it up into Canada. That's
Yeah.
why I don't have a really distinctive Canadian accent.
No, I'm from Minnesota, so my Canadian accent is probably stronger than yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the island, the population, just to answer your question, during peak time, during like the tourist season, which most of the tourists or the holiday makers come from the US, it's about 1,500. And during the winter season, when there's no ferry, it's like, less than 100.
Wow.
That's even smaller. My parents lived in a really small town in Arizona, and there was a population of 3,000. So even that has it. I'm actually curious. I'm looking up the Jindo Island on Wikipedia. I actually don't see the population here. I might have to.
Sorry, guys. This is
Oh,
the.
no problem. No problem.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. No problem. It's like
how long were you here in Korea total?
For 5 years.
5 years. Okay, cool. I guess just judging by that quick interaction there, how's your Korean after 5 years? I mean, if you're living in such a small place, you'd probably have no choice but to use Korean.
So and
that's one definite benefit.
Like Jack was saying, so on Jindo, I love Jindo, don't get me wrong, but there's not much to do during the week on Jindo.
No doubt.
Mhm.
So I did yoga 5 days a week.
That was interesting to me
In
because
Korean.
it's almost like a kind of cosmopolitan thing though, like yoga, but here on this little island it
was the one and only yoga studio in the place, and it was either like you chose yoga or you did taekwondo. Those are your two choices.
I think yoga. Yeah, right. I want to keep my teeth,
So that's what I did. And my yoga teacher became like a sister to me. She didn't speak any English like at all, but she was just so lovely and so like warm and wanted to make sure I was welcome and felt included. And then someone who was sort of like a yoga teacher in training came from Seoul, and that person did speak English. So like eventually, like I sort of became part of their like inner circle and was, invited to lunch and, her daughter's like birthday parties and
Nice.
yeah.
That's very, and how did it affect like your language as far as like, I think Kevin kind of alluded to that earlier, but did it force you to, I mean, like yoga 5 days a week?
Yeah,
is kind of
absolutely.
extreme,
It forced
right?
you. Yeah.
But you just did
Everything
it
was
more for the
Korean.
socializing than the yoga, right? It became more of like a, it sounds like, I mean, the yoga is good, but you actually made a friendship through that. So maybe
That
5
wasn't
days
the
a week is normal,
intention.
but yeah.
It wasn't the intention. It was just sort of,
It's
the
just a
intention
happy
was just,
accident.
yeah, just something to do after I was teaching all day. My language was great. Especially, conversational English or conversational Korean, because I wanted to be able to communicate. And then I had the friend who was Korean who was working at a hagwon, whose wife, she had already sort of gone through the ropes. So she gave me all of her materials to study. So I was, studying and then practicing it every day with my yoga teacher. So
Yeah.
It was.
Did you find it like we talked about this before on the podcast, but the Korean alphabet is pretty easy to learn. Like you can learn it in a day. So did you find like learning to read and write pretty easy, like self-study worked for you? Like it was okay?
Yeah, I could read it and write it within like you said, like a day.
Yeah.
But it's funny because teaching my son the Hangul alphabet now, sometimes I have to stop and think, what is that actually called? And it's like
Right.
or like
Yeah, well, the name of the letters took me a really long time to learn. I'm like, that's the d sound. Like, yeah, to actually learn the name of it. How did you study? Was there like a hagwon or something, or did you just do self-study or just with friends there then?
Oh, self-study, only self-study. There was not.
I wouldn't imagine that there's like a Korean hagwon or anything there. No. With 8 foreigners, there's not much of a money-making option to open a hagwon.
Do you think maybe? Sorry, go ahead.
It wasn't that time. It wasn't, now learning Korean is the thing to do, right? Or it's almost the expectation that you're going to have a base level of Korean before you enter the country, especially if you're going there to, to live for a while. But at the time, I didn't feel like people expected that I would know anything. So if I knew anything, they were so grateful that I could give them.
Yeah, I mean, that was even the same when I was living in bigger cities here. And I lived in Seoul and Suwon for a year. And I remember one time when I was quite new in Korea, and my Korean at the time was, crazy basic. And I remember going into some restaurant and like just ordering the food, and the woman who was working there was like, "Wow, your Korean is very good." I was like, "I'm learning. Please speak slowly to me." And she's like, "Okay, no problem. So where are you from? What do you do?" And she just immediately goes to full on Korean. Just not used to switching, but amazed that I spoke any at all.
Yeah, that's funny how that. Even if I say I don't speak Korean well, if you say that in Korean, then you completely you just turned it around on yourself. Yeah, that's so funny. So you're in the small this island for the first year, and then did they ask you to stay longer? I mean, they must have been pretty happy to have teachers that are enthusiastic about going to small towns. It's hard to find teachers, I imagine.
They did, but I wanted, because that first year I was in a hagwon.
Mm-hmm.
So the real motivation to change was to get out of the hagwon system.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you talk to other teachers that were teaching in public school or university, and then you realized like, oh my God, the package is so much better. like this is just a stepping stone. Nobody wants to stay here in the hagwon, especially if you have a master's degree. It's
Ironically,
Yeah.
so on that small island in Canada where I was living and working prior to going to Korea, I made friends with someone because that small island also needs to import all of its workers. There isn't enough young people to staff the seasonal jobs. So I met a guy who was working or who was sort of really well connected. His father had an important job. He worked in Seoul, like in the main government building, writing that package. And so before I went, he was like, look, you really don't want to go to a hagwon. There's so much, like, these are X, Y, and Z. These are all the reasons why you need to work in a school. And I was just so fixated on this island, and that was, the position was available. It was the right time. And I was just like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go. It's only a year.
I mean,
working at a hagwon, I mean, so many people do that as their first. I did a hagwon for my first year here. It's just like kind of, it's almost
like
a rite of passage.
Yeah, exactly.
Just how you get started.
Yeah. And then you can say it was like, you know, I've been through that, you know. It's something you share with other, you know, other professors that you meet or whatever when you're in Korea. What was your hagwon like? What was the situation there? Was it pretty good, or was it not what you were told it was? Or, I know there's some like horror stories of hagwons, but it doesn't sound like yours was like that.
No, it wasn't terrible. I mean, it wasn't the greatest experience, but it wasn't really negative.
Yeah.
The kids were great. My co-teachers were great. The
only downside I really see of the hagwon system is that there's no holiday. You get like 2 weeks, and that's it. And then you compare that to like public school and university, and you're just like, well, it's a no-brainer. Like I can do the same thing, but you have much larger vacation periods, but the pay is probably a little bit better than a hagwon.
Yeah, but for me it was the holiday time.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's probably pretty much true for most teachers, and it makes me feel like I don't know if you felt this too, but working in the university system, there's like a beginning and an end of the semester. I love that. Yes. Because the hagwon feels like a never-ending hamster wheel, you know, of like there's always going to be another book, another level up, and another new class coming in, and I don't know how people could do that for 20 years. I mean, I know people have, but I just don't see that model is impossible. But I love the university system or public school where they actually move on to the next level and it's finished. The school year's done. You can reset and start over again. And so what was your, you said the second, I just want to make sure I got this right. Your move from Jindo, away from Jindo to the next school was a public school. It was an elementary school. How was that situation for you? What was like, as far as like the package? And
it was great. It was great. I loved it. I loved the students. I was there for 3 years, so you know, you get to see them go through almost all of elementary school.
Sure.
I had a wonderful co-teacher who I still am in contact with today, and his kids, and I ended up getting to teach like his eldest in my last year.
Oh, very cool. Like in first grade, like wow, yeah. That's fun.
And because when you teach in elementary school, you have not every school, but so because I was in a rural school, there was, and I don't know if there still is, but there was this thing called like a rainbow school. So it was a special program that you had to apply for, and it was quite there was quite a lot of pressure. It was quite intense for the teachers to apply to this program. But basically, because it was such a rural area, many of the students were being raised by their grandparents.
Oh, sure.
Or, you know, some
the parents are like in town, like doing the work.
Parents are working in Seoul, and the grandparents are raising their kids.
And the grandparents were often quite old. The grandparents maybe didn't have any education themselves. Like these were farmers, like true, like hardworking farmers. But so because of that, the school would be open from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. and there was buses that would come and pick up the students. So in that case, there was many opportunities to do sort of like extra overtime work. So like the school might come and say, Stephanie, can you teach the students art in English? And you can do this for overtime, or can you teach Yuchi-1, or can you teach year 1? Because they had this, with this rainbow program, you got a massive budget because the students were having 3 meals a day at school, and they needed to have, entertainment or supervision or some kind of like stimulation before school and after school, all the way until it was basically bedtime.
And with those government programs, you spend it, you don't spend it, you lose it.
Yeah.
So for them, it's not like they're losing any money. It's not a private school. They're just like, we got to give this money to somebody so that we can get the same amount the next time around. Otherwise, so those are great situations where they're just like throwing classrooms or classes at you and money, and you're just like,
and resources. The resources were incredible. I mean, I think it was well spent because these students needed it. They definitely needed it, and you could see, because I went into that school 1 year prior, and I watched the change from not having it to having it. So the whole like demeanor and the confidence in the kids was so like apparent. And just the simple things, like they all were given like a reform hanbok, and everyone, including the teachers, wore a hanbok at school.
That's cool.
It's like your uniform. Nice.
Because a lot of the kids weren't coming to school like properly dressed for the weather.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
Maybe it was they were wearing clothes that were too hot or too cold, in the winter.
Yes. And so to try, I mean, this is something I really like about Korea, actually, and something in America. I don't know if you're familiar with the US. You probably are. The schools are funded based on property taxes. So, rich neighborhoods or rich areas have really nice schools, and poor areas have really crappy schools. But Korea has these kinds of programs where they're trying to give these opportunities to these rural places. So you're kind of painting a picture for like what we could expect as far as being a good student. There's not a lot of accessible. It's not like Gangnam where there's, hagwons on every corner. These kids are kind of either hanging out with their grandparents or they're at school, and sounds like they'd rather be at school because they can play and be around kids and stuff. So it's a really cool program. But part of today, we one of the reasons we really wanted to talk to you was what was your experience like living in that small town and small island, and then going to like Seoul or Daegu or something, like going to the big, how is it different? Like,
well, even before we get to that, I'm curious more about like just arriving in such a small town with such small support, like, going to restaurants when you first got there. What was that like before you really had much drink? Because the people in that town, I assume, like in Seoul, you can go to a restaurant, you can actually kind of order in English. You can like find people. If you want to find like a subway stop, you look for the young person and be like, oh, where's the subway here?
Or just
like,
go to
whatever.
Loteria or McDonald's or something like that.
Right. Actually, I mean, I'd assume there's even less fast food down there. Like what was like your first eating out experience like there? How did you deal with food, for example?
That friend, bless his soul, that the Korean man who had the American fiance, now American wife, rang me on the home line that I didn't even know the number to, and said, hi sister, my name is blah blah blah, have you eaten, would you like to come out? And literally we went to just a kimbap nara, and I was a vegetarian, and so the first thing he taught me was like, right, this is how you say I'm a vegetarian in Korean, and he wrote it all out.
An important sentence.
Nice. Not an easy task in Korea either. Oh my gosh.
And helped me. His fiance was also vegetarian, so he was like, I got this, I'll help you. But he didn't have to do that. He sort of just did that out of the kindness of his heart, right? And then so I think I landed on like a Friday, maybe a Thursday. And it was a surreal experience, right? Because I landed in Incheon, transferred to Gimpo by myself, somehow managed that to get from Incheon to Gimpo by myself, get from Gimpo to Gwangju Airport, and then the Hagwon's son met me in my meal.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So it's one of those like you're basically flying blind because you can't read anything, and that's a scary.
How did you handle what was like your first time going out to eat the next day or the following day when you were on your own then? How was that down there? I still remember, like, for me, my first day going out to eat here, I walked into a kimbap jjanguk and I knew nothing in Korea other than bibimbap. Like, I knew that was a food, and I walked in. I'm just like, okay, I want bibimbap, and I remember because in Korea, I'm sure you have to like call out to the wait staff, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know that you would do that, so I just sat down and I just waited. And no one came to me because this isn't like a restaurant. It's kimbap
most
jjanguk,
indecisive foreigner we've ever had.
And I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, I'm like hungry. I'm like trying to make eye contact with the ajima there, and then no one comes until finally some woman next to me decides like, let's help out this pitiable foreigner next to me. But like, and then I ate nothing but bibimbap probably for 3 weeks because it was the only food I knew. I couldn't read the menu. I didn't know anything. Finally, I remember one of my friends was like, you should try yukkejang. I was like, another food, and then my whole universe opened up. But that first, like, that beginning, even being in a big city, I just knew nothing, and I was just on my own. I just stuck to the one thing I knew for so long.
So when you work at a hagwon, they give you your meals, right?
Mine did
sometimes not my second one, but my first one I did. Yeah.
Mine did. So I had bibimbap for 1 year straight.
I mean, bibimbap's good. I quite like, although for a while I got very sick of it.
Well, I mean, I guess if you're a vegetarian though, that would be the best you could really hope for, as far like it's still pretty delicious every time, and you can just get it without the meat and the egg, and you're fine. Yeah.
I was content to have it every day, and I think like maybe the difference, because you guys were sort of like the end of that first wave, if you will, and I was probably like the beginning of the second wave, I think I came a bit more prepared. So I had done the research. I knew quite a few dishes already. Mm-hmm. I knew that I would have to say like chogyeo and but
which is
probably
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was probably made sure I was prepared because I was a vegetarian and I knew I had that.
That's true. Yeah, I knew. Yeah, I had a friend here who was vegan, and he knew more about Korean food than anyone I knew, just because you have to know what you're ordering, otherwise, you're gonna end up not being a vegetarian very quickly here. So yeah, that's true. I guess you said you were here in 2014, so like that would be after Gangnam Style, of course. So Korea is already starting to become a little bit more well known. Like when we came here, I was able to find websites teaching me Hangul and things like that, but there wasn't as much on like general, culture tips and YouTube channels and things like that. Weren't as like, big, at least.
In 2002, Korea wasn't like it wasn't as cool as it is now. It's just like, it's the hip thing, like Korean food, Korean cuisine. I mean, everyone's just going crazy. When you came, probably like Big Bang was like really popular. Like, is that right?
And sorry, I need to retract my first statement. I've got my dates mixed up. No 2014 was when I emigrated to Australia. I was there in 2009 and left Korea in 2014. But yes, Big Bang was.
It was like that generation of we're probably one or two past that now with the newer bands or whatever, but I know what that era that you're talking about.
But Big Bang's coming back.
They're coming back again. That's what I hear. Yeah. Let's see. So I was going to ask you something and it just slipped out of my. So you said that you're a vegetarian. So how did you survive as a vegetarian? Like Kevin said, from then on, how did you manage that on such a small town or small island? Because I imagine even getting invited to a hueshik involves some kind of meat, right? Like there's just, what meat are we eating tonight? It must be very difficult.
So can I, before I went to Korea, I didn't eat meat and I didn't drink coffee.
Okay.
So I started drinking coffee immediately because all my coworkers, they would offer, like something that I couldn't eat and coffee. Yeah. So if I refused the food and the coffee, then I felt like,
gotta take at least one of the two.
Coffee addiction through. saying no to, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
my
it. So, and to
Are
be
you
honest,
vegan or vegetarian only?
just vegetarian. And
Okay.
that first
Vegan would be very difficult.
that first bibimbap was not vegetarian. And I just sort of went with it, but I was so sick afterwards because it's the first, it'd been the first time in 10 years that my body had had meat in it. But I just sort of like just rolled with it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's gonna be those kinds of situations where you just the wires are gonna get crossed and you're gonna get some meat in the dish or whatever. But
well, and I heard so many people, like other vegetarian friends, where they would go and order like a kimbap, and they would say, because their Korean wasn't very good, so they'd be like, "Gogi bejuseyo," like take out the meat.
Yeah.
And the people at the kimbap jungle would be like, "There's no meat in here," and there's their meat right there, and they're thinking, they're like, "It's ham. That's not meat.
That's not meat.
It's
You really
ham.
need to specify. You really need
It's
to
not
specify.
gogi."
Yeah.
That's fish.
So
That's
I
not
had
meat.
so like in Jindo attracts a really specific crowd. One of the things about Jindo is it's really it's well known for its traditional music, and there is a beautiful hall where you can go for free every weekend and watch like these traditional performances. And there was one foreigner there who was teaching there, but he was there specifically because he was studying, I don't remember the name of the instrument. He also happened to be vegetarian. He also happened to speak fluent Korean.
Wow, so lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was like, this is what you need to say. You need to say, and you need to list off all the meat that you don't eat, because in their mind, that's not meat. So it's like the Greeks, when it's like, my big fat greeting, when they're like, it's just lamb. It's kind of, so you have to,
it's not meat, it's lamb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to tell them, yeah, ham is, I consider ham to be meat, or I consider mulgogi, I consider fish to be meat, and you list them all off. But what's like, because it's a small town, people know you and they know your order if you go a few times.
Sure. That's probably the advantage of being in a small town, is that they do quickly learn what you like, and they I think they want to please the guest. I mean, that's a big part of, I think, Korean culture is very much they want you to like Korea, and so they're going to be very amenable to your needs. I guess like when you jumped to the public school, what about the move to the university? How did that happen for you? Did you just like find a job on Dave's ESL Cafe or something, or?
No, I had friends who were already there who recommended and said, this
connections.
Is
Parachute in, as the Koreans say. Yep.
Yeah, and that's how it happened. I had the qualifications, I had the experience. It was time.
Yeah. Now, was that like, as far as you sound like you really enjoyed the public school, but I'm assuming it's still a pretty hefty workload, 7 o'clock with all the extra classes and everything. Was the university kind of like did it give you a chance to kind of like travel around and see the country during those vacations? I think
it was just more, to be honest, depending on your school, you can have a lot of holiday time in the elementary school system. If your principal doesn't require you to desk warm, you can have a significant amount of time off. For me, it was more about like a career progression, or seeing, because there's only so far you can go in the elementary school system.
Sure.
So yeah, but I do enjoy it. I do enjoy teaching adults, but I do enjoy teaching kids.
Yeah. What was the when you like, did you have when you went to what was the biggest city that you went to, like, for the first time? Like you're on this island, and then all of a sudden you'd go to like Daegu, and it feels like you're entering New York City or something. I mean, did that ever happen to you? Did you get that like kind of culture shock of the big city?
The first time was with my foreign Korean couple friend, who he had a car, and we went to Mokpo to go to E-Mart, because that was the closest E-Mart was a 40 to 50 minute drive by car, and that was the only place you could get any sort of Western, like ingredients or Western groceries.
Right. Cheese.
Cheese, avocado, things like that. So it was a big sort of like a big day out just to stock up on all those things.
That's
kind of random. What specific food were you most excited about? For me, I remember when I found lime, I was so excited because lime, when I came to Korea, was impossible. It was lemon everywhere, but lime wasn't a thing. And when I finally found a lime, I was like, oh my God, a lime. It's the smallest thing, but I was so excited for that.
For me, it was
that for you?
Feta cheese. Yeah. For me,
feta
it was
cheese.
feta cheese.
Nice. Brilliant.
I saw a girl do a literally dance in Costco once when she found the shredded cheese. Like she was, I didn't know her. My wife and I were just shopping, but I saw this. I'm like, oh, they're new Hagwon teachers, and she found the shredded cheese, and she just started dancing in the middle of the aisle, just like
the cheese dance.
I know I had that in. I used to teach in Thailand. That was my first job back in 2001, and I remember 6 months in finding saltine crackers at the grocery store. And we bought all of them, like because every cracker was like a Ritz cracker. It was all sugary, but that saltine cracker, it's just and it reminds you of home. And there's so I bet you probably walked around that E-Mart all for hours and enjoyed every minute of it. I bet because it's just
these days people have it easy here. You can get pretty much everything.
I know.
Yeah, no. The culture shock I think was trying to park at the E-Mart. It was a Sunday in the morning, I think. And it was just, I've never seen people just shopping like their life depends on it.
Did you ever go to Costco? Because that's just like up next level here.
I don't think, to be honest, when I was there, I don't think there was I think the closest Costco was Daegu, which was for me like 5 hours away.
Yeah, that's quite far. I've heard, I don't have the statistics to back it up, but I've heard someone say that there's a bunch of Costco's here, of course, in Seoul. And there's the one in Yangjae Station, like Gangnam area. I've heard that that's the busiest Costco in the world. Actually,
I will believe it.
Yeah, I've been there a few times, and it's no picnic. Yeah, you literally the cars wrap around the whole store.
Yeah,
several times.
Yeah, it's stressful.
Yeah,
agreed. I hate Costco runs. Actually,
no,
the one that I go to.
Were you at this time? You're okay.
No.
Okay.
I was happily a passenger.
Right, but the chaos of trying to park in there because there's so many people on a Sunday.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Now, did you ever make it to Seoul? Like, did you get to visit the capital city and
went to Seoul many times.
Yeah,
of course.
Maybe a bit pretentious of us, but because I was in Jeollado, so when you get your visa to go, when you're in the embassy, they every worker will comment, you're going to the place with the best food. You are going to eat, like that's what they'll say to you in whatever like English they have. You are going to have such good food where you're going.
And just for our listeners, Jeolla province, is that what you're talking about? Jeolla province is famous for it's like Jeonju bibimbap. Is that
so I was in the southern part. So Jeonju is in the northern province. I was in the southern province. It is mostly farmland. So that's where all the produce is grown. That's where the rice is grown. Predominantly where the seafood comes from, where the Naju pears are there.
Korean pears are the best.
So when we went to Seoul for the first time and we had Korean barbecue, we were like, what is this?
It's funny. I've never actually been to Jeollado, but so my mother-in-law she makes like amazing. I mean, everything she makes in Korean food, of course, is just like the best Korean food out there, and her kimchi is top shelf. And I'm always bragging to my friends like, oh yeah, my mother-in-law's kimchi is like the best ever, and they're like, where is she from? And I'm like, oh, she's from Jeollado. They're like, oh, that makes sense.
But apparently it's true though. Like it's not just a myth. They do have the best food. So when you came to Seoul, you felt it was just didn't meet the quality of what you had been.
So we actually, amongst my friends, and all of my friends were from Jeolla, different cities in Jeolla. We had a rule that when we went to Seoul, we were only going to eat foreign food because we couldn't get it. We couldn't often get it.
Sure,
or there
makes sense.
So it just didn't make sense because we were disappointed. And because
Yeah, the Korean food here is just not up to snuff.
Korean
But
food sucks in
Yeah.
Seoul. Yeah.
that is a bit
Go to the
pretentious, but kind of
source, man.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said, yeah, it's pretentious.
I love
we
it,
were
though.
aware that it was pretentious, but
Yeah.
you know,
But actually,
also
that makes
couldn't
perfect
get
sense to me,
Taco
though.
Bell.
Yeah, you can't get Mexican food down there
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Were there
So
any foreign
sometimes-
restaurants in where you were living down there?
There was a
Other than
pizza-
like fast food?
pizza place, but it's like
Mm.
pizza or like pasta,
Yeah.
but, you know.
Right, but not proper.
It's not
Yeah.
pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's so funny because you get accustomed to that, right? So now living in Sydney, like I crave pizza school pizza.
Oh, right. That like really.
Do you like corn on your pizza?
Yeah.
No?
I never used to, but like corn or like sweet potato, like
I know. I love the sweet potato too. I love
Really?
it. You're not into it, huh?
I don't like. Do you like the sweet potato like paste stuff
Yes,
like
I
that?
love it.
No, I just not a fan. For me, I
here's
love sweet
your,
potato. I love pizza, but not together.
Not
for
do
me.
You guys do you put pickles, sweet pickles, and hot sauce on it on top of the slice?
Well, I don't put it on, but the sweet pickles on the side of the pizza. Yeah,
No, I
have
put the
gotten used to
pickles
that.
on the pizza, and then you put the hot.
That's not even
Isn't that what you're
Korean
supposed
style.
to-
That's just your style.
No, that's Korean style. Am I wrong?
Really?
That's not what Koreans do?
I think some of them do, but I don't know. My husband doesn't put
Okay.
it on, but like, so my husband is Korean, but we have pickles at the table every single time we have pizza.
Yeah. Oh, maybe
Yeah.
I just made an assumption. Like I put this on here, and I've been doing it wrong. Okay. Well,
But it makes sense. You
Yeah.
put pickles in a sandwich, right?
yeah, that's
Pickles go
true,
great
and
with
it tastes
cheese,
good.
pickles- yeah.
Is pizza a sandwich now? Are we classifying?
No,
it?
I'm just saying you can
No, I know.
the car.
Gosh. So how, you went to the university after your second year, and you said you spent 3 years at the university. What kind of what was teaching did you do? Was it like a lot of freshman English courses?
Yes.
And okay. And how were the students there? How did you find the English level of students, like maybe compared to like what city to country?
I think like probably their level wouldn't be this as on par with like a city.
Mhm.
I mean, it was quite rare to get a student who had already studied abroad, right?
Mhm.
Most of them they had studied, they had gone through the system of English in elementary school, or if not elementary school, they had gotten some of it in their middle school or high school, but it really, really depends on the sort of which high school or which middle school they had gone to, because some
Right.
had really strong programs and some.
And some of the, like
much.
you're talking about that rainbow program, like one of the things that I think the complaints of rural Koreans is that there's not enough academies. Like there's so many in the big city, like you can just the kids go to Hagwon. Hagwon has become almost replaced public school in a weird way. Like without Hagwon, if you take that out of the equation, they're so far behind, and a lot of the rural kids just don't have it's not accessible to them. You have to drive too far, or it's too expensive, or whatever. Were a lot of those kids that you were teaching at university, did they kind of miss out on the Hagwon experience, and they just?
No, I think if they were in that position, they were one of the kids who had the chance to go to a Hagwon.
Okay.
I think because that rainbow program that I had been a part of, that was brand new.
Okay.
So they haven't had enough time to sort of go through that system yet.
And
so when I was,
sorry, go ahead.
When I was teaching there, so I taught at 2 schools in the elementary system. So I taught at one school 4 days a week and one school once a week. And the one school that was once a week only had 68 students.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see all 68 of them in one day.
Right. Teach the whole school through one work day. Yeah.
But both schools were competing to try and get this rainbow program. So it was something that was quite desirable, but it was a really intense program. So my co-teacher at my main school also was the head teacher. And so there were days when I didn't see him at all because he was writing up this proposal, trying to convince, the powers that be that school was worthy of getting the rainbow program.
Right. So they're still kind of fighting for the limited funding.
Yes.
So it's not as equal as maybe what I described earlier, because there's still kind of the government is funding certain schools and others are maybe a little bit less funded.
I think it was because it was still like in the trial stages.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Probably if we went there now, they might all be doing it. Who knows?
I know they had an after school program as well, where which was supposed to be a supplement for or a substitute for Hagwon, where kids who maybe didn't have access to Hagwons for, it could be financial reasons or whatever, got to study with a foreign teacher, basically doing a Hagwon class in the public school. And it sounds like it sounds a little bit like that program, possibly.
Yeah. It could be now. It's been a while.
Yeah. Now, well, we're just as we wrap up here, we're getting close to the end.
I'm curious to go back to Korea stuff, away from the teaching a bit more. But what, other than amazing food in Jeollado, what do you think what are the charms that like small towns in Korea have that Seoul doesn't? Why do you love small towns in what's different about like small town in Korea compared to small town in Canada or something like that? Like what's Korea have? What are those small Korea towns? What's amazing? What did you love about that small place where you live?
Oh, it's hard to say, but I think like there's a really strong sense of community. And maybe different than to like a small town in Canada. With that sense of community, there is that really strong sense of duty within the community.
That's interesting, because I mean, Korea just in general is very communist, very community based.
Careful.
The whole Udi. Yeah. What's the word? What am I looking for?
It's not communist.
Communal.
Communal.
Yeah. I mean, it's the Udi culture. Like everyone is family here. You go into a kimbap jjonguk and it's like emo when you're calling out. Like everyone is connected anyway. But it's superficial here in Seoul, right? It's just in the culture. But in those small towns, you really do know everyone, and there really is that community.
Okay, I know we're running out of time, but I'll give you one example of this just before we finish. So all of the foreigners had gone to swim at this beach, probably about 50 minutes away from Jindo Up. We just on a whim decided we were going to go. While we were there, and no one believed me, I got stung by a jellyfish.
I believe you.
That's what happens in Australia. That happens, but
but see, everyone was like, "No, you didn't."
Yeah. I've been stung here. That happens.
I clearly felt that. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see it, but anyway, progressively, an hour passes and I'm not feeling well. I'm feeling very ill, like to the point where I feel like I'm gonna vomit. I've got a really bad headache. I'm getting chest pains. The foreigner friends are like, so I see this woman, this Ajuma on the beach, and I try and tell her, she can see I'm distressed, and she asks me what's wrong, and I try and tell her. She gets me in her car, she takes me to like a medical center in this village. The medical center is closed. She gets on her phone, she rings someone else. In the meantime, I've gotten on the phone and I'm speaking with one of my Korean friends who is from Jindo but happens to be in Gwangju. Then they talk to each other, realize what's happening. She drives me to the hospital, like 45 minutes to the hospital. It's like, you need to see a doctor immediately. Well, my foreign friends are like back at the beach, like just partying, and I'm at the hospital and I have to call them.
Stranger is driving you around. No, it sounded like you had an allergic reaction. You needed some kind of a shot or something.
Yeah, I had an IV and they took out the stinger.
Oh my god.
That seems when I got stung, my stung, I was wearing a wetsuit, so I only got a very light one across my face when I was diving a bunch of years ago. But that's a pretty amazing, I mean, that's small town community. That's something that I've run into just in small towns of like, even where my parents lived in Arizona and things like that. People do look out for each other a little bit more. Although I do think in general, Koreans are willing to help. Koreans are very cool about
everybody's got that story
but
where somebody walked you far, but driving you 45 minutes and calling for you,
that's pretty epic.
Way above, over and above the Call of Duty. So that's a very cool story. It probably leaves you're have a warm place for Korea. It sounds like. Did you?
Yes.
In those 5 years, you had a very good, positive experience here. Do you do you come back from time to time, or do you plan to return? Okay.
We come back as often as we can to visit my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I would move back in a heartbeat. I would work and teach, but like my husband is Korean and he has to live by Korean in work standards. So for him, living and working in Australia, you know, gives him the opportunity to have like a work-life balance because he's an engineer, right?
Sure.
So,
right.
Yeah.
That kind of job in Korea would
decision,
be.
which way to go. Yeah.
Yeah. And he doesn't really want to have like our kids go through the Hagwon system where they're studying.
Yep.
You know.
That's
that's a whole different issue. But we've all had that discussion about you know, are the Hagwons worth it? Do you want to send your kids to it? Blah, blah, blah.
Well, if our first year in Hagwon is our trauma, then their high school years is their trauma, right? Stephanie, thank you so much for.
That's
sorry,
a
Kevin,
cool story to end on. No, that's what I was going to say.
I thought that was a really cool story to end on. Yeah.
Yeah, that small towns people will look out for you while your friends are partying at the beach. You've got the Ajima who's got your back.
Good friends, by the way.
Yeah,
good Lord.
I know that.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, man.
Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us today and telling your story.
Definitely.
We really wanted to share that.
Having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And to our listeners out there, if you guys want to listen to the episode, you can go to thesoulpatch.com. You can hit subscribe on our YouTube channel. If you want to contact us, you can send us an email at podcast@thesoulpatch.com. And if you visit our website, it's a one-stop shop. And if you have the funds, you can hit that send coffee button. We have a Patreon account now. If not, no problem. And we'll catch you next week at the Patch. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Nice. Thanks.
I'd like to pay a couple respects to the people that made me what I am today.
Nothing gear.
Kiss all my love. Kiss all my love.
The quiet man.
Kiss all my love. Kiss all my love.
Dopamine. Jim.
Kiss all my love. Kiss all my love. Kiss all my love.
The brain.
Kiss all my love. Kiss all my love.
Hey Bobby. Let the bass go. Call me an eater, call me a dominant.